Hey YouTubers, if you've watched my channel before, you know I've been kind of looking for some new speakers. If this is your first time here, then thanks for dropping by. I hope you find this helpful. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a script here. There's things I always want to cover and I forget to, and so I'm going to read off my sheet here a little bit. First of all, like I say, returning viewers, thank you for coming back and joining me on this journey. My goal here is to find a set of speakers that I'm really happy with. The speakers I've had over here, I'll talk about them in a moment, I've had for 35 years, and I'm kind of in the mood for something different. And being a little nitpicky, it's not as easy a task as I had hoped. And so I also wanted to mention some of your comments. I welcome the comments. Y'all have made some great suggestions, and I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one that feels this way about particular speakers. I just want to throw a few things out there. If I say something that I don't care for about a particular speaker, please don't take it personally. I'm glad you love them, they're just not for me. Also, as far as the audio or video quality or production quality of my videos, I'm just shooting it with my iPhone, and I'm just doing it mostly because it's kind of fun, and I'm getting to meet some great people who have similar interests and opinions. One thing this journey has done is it's absolutely reaffirmed everything I've always heard about speakers having the greatest impact on musical reproduction. Every speaker has its own personality, and the difference from one to another can be very dramatic. Whereas in my opinion, electronics all sound very similar. I'm not going to say they sound the same. And when you get down into interconnects and wires and things like that, now we're talking about real subtleties. But the difference from one speaker to another can be very, very dramatic. And I've sort of formed the opinion that there's a spectrum that speakers exist on, anywhere from very, very neutral to very dynamic, or maybe with a very strong personality. And I'm kind of looking for something somewhere in between. In my opinion, again, neutral speakers that have very good tonality and reproduce music very accurately can be enjoyable to listen to if you have a good recording. I found that to be true of the electrostatic speakers I've tried. With the right recording, they're magnificent. But with a lot of rock and roll and stuff maybe that isn't recorded all that great, they're really disappointing. Whereas a speaker that's more punchy and dynamic and has a bit more personality to it can take even the dullest recording and make it exciting. So the analytical part of my brain wants something that's accurate, but my emotions are I want something that's exciting. So somewhere on that spectrum, I'm convinced that my perfect speaker is out there, and I think I'm getting really close. But anyhow, these have been my go-to speakers for 35 years. So these speakers have a lot of charisma. They're not a neutral speaker at all. They have very deep, punchy bass that's startling for an 8-inch woofer. You wouldn't think it could do what it does. It'll shake the floors. They also project a lot of detail in the upper frequencies. Like I said, at times though, that upper frequency detail was a bit much. Even dialing it back with the Silk Dome tweeters, it can still be a bit bright. With no mid-range driver here, your vocals get split between either primarily the woofer or primarily the tweeter, and this can change the tonality of the voices. I think this is, in my opinion, something you're going to run into with any two-way speaker. Male voices that get dropped down more to the woofer actually sound pretty good. I like Lyle Lovett and Parker Millsap and folks like that. I think it actually makes them sound even better. But folks with higher frequency voices and female voices get pushed up to the tweeter, and like I say, these can be a little bright on that end. So although they sound good at low volume, when you turn them up, they can be a bit much on the upper end. So I'm looking for something to keep as much of that dynamic and excitement that this brings to music, but a little bit more neutral in tone. And so that's what I'm looking for. Now, I've got a list here of some of the speakers that have been through this room in the past 18 months or so. And just quick 1 or 2 word descriptions of what I thought were their good and not so good points. And now some of these were gifts, some were on loan, and a few were purchased from Crutchfield and then returned because it just didn't quite work out the way I had hoped. The most interesting ones by far, a friend gave me a pair of Acustat 2+2 electrostatic speakers. These things are 8 foot tall and 24 inches wide, and they're just really weird and in a cool way. There's nothing else like them. Huge soundstage. It makes it sound like the music is coming from the entire front wall, from floor to ceiling, wall to wall, but they have a minuscule sweet spot. You know, you sit in just the right spot and it's magic. And you move just a couple inches and it just sort of goes away. So I had a lot of fun restoring those, but passed them on to somebody else. I borrowed a pair of KEF LS50s. I had heard so much hype about those speakers and really wanted to love them, and they weren't for me. They had a nice sound stage, but they sounded a little metallic to me and had a very limited dynamic range. They're interesting. If you need a small speaker, they're definitely worth considering, but I've got room for something bigger. I had a pair of monitor audio speakers that were on loan from a friend. I don't remember the exact model number. I think they were maybe in the silver series. They were smallish towers, about 3 foot tall, and with a pair of like 6-inch woofers and a metal tweeter. Nice sound stage, but again, they kind of reminded me of the KEFs a little bit. They sounded a little metallic. And, you know, even though I use a subwoofer with all of these speakers, I couldn't find a balance between the subwoofer and the monitors that made me happy. So I returned those with much gratitude to my friend who loaned them to me. I tried a pair of Polk R700s in here. Again, I'd read lots of great things about them, had high hopes. I got them in here. They kind of left me meh. To me, they're on the neutral end of the spectrum, and I thought they had adequate bass, actually a little thick in the bass, in the upper bass, I thought. Even moving them 4 feet out from the wall, I felt like they were just a little much for this room. And I was a little disappointed. The high frequencies, you know, they have that very unique tweeter, and I read good things about it, but for me, they just sounded a little rolled off on the upper end. And so those went back. The next thing I tried is I was really kind of smitten with certain aspects of those Accustats. So I tried a pair of Martin Logans. I don't remember the model number. It's their most inexpensive Martin Logan model. And like the other Accustat, 8 foot tall speakers, big soundstage, good vocals. I thought that the Martin Logans had a little bit of a weakness where it transitions from the panel to the woofer that's built into it. I felt like that was just a little clumsy, and they could have handled that a little bit better, and we're right back again to the tiny sweet spot. I get a lot of emails from Crutchfield, and they had some speakers that looked interesting, and I saw lots of good reviews, and I went to order a pair, and they reached out to me and said, we'd like to talk to you about your speaker quest here because we think we can guide you, and maybe these aren't the best choice for you. And so I talked to Paul at Crutchfield, and he was awesome. And I told him about how I felt like my old speakers were a little sibilant. I'd lived with it for a long time, but I wanted something a little smoother the next time around. And I told him what I liked and what I didn't like about them. And he said, I think you would really like the Dali speakers. They have a very unique sound, and they have a very wide sound stage and a very large sweet spot. And I have 2 chairs in my listening room, and I wanted to be able to enjoy it from either seat. And so he recommended the Opticon 2 Mark II. Now, what's interesting about the Dalis is they're, from about the middle of their product line down, those speakers have steel frame woofers and mid-range, and they're assembled in Dali's factories in China. From the Opticon up, they're hand assembled in Denmark, and they're made in matched pairs. And rather than using a stamped steel chassis, they use die-cast aluminum chassis for the mid-range and woofers. Now, cabinet-wise, from the Opticon down, you get a simple MDF cabinet with a vinyl wrap. Above the Opticon, you start getting into your wood finishes and what have you. So the Opticon model line sits right there in the middle. You get the better components from the upper models, but you get the simpler square boxes from the lower models. So it's kind of a little sweet spot there, as Paul explained to me, and I agree with him on that. So I got the Opticon 2 Mark IIs in here. I got some appropriate stands for them. During that period between speakers, I also went from a single rail subwoofer, I think it was a Model 7, to a pair of Model 9s. A friend of mine made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I've got dual, more than adequate subwoofers. And so I spent a couple weeks with the Opticon 2s. And they do, in fact, have a huge sweet spot. Either chair sounded fantastic. Big soundstage, neutral tone, great vocals, and detail without fatigue. But being a stand mount speaker with a, I think it was a 6 or 6.5 inch woofer, they have limited dynamics when you turn them up. Now the subwoofer, of course, you turn up, the subwoofer could keep up with the music, but I felt like the Opticon 2s just sort of got compressed before the listening level got to what I would have liked to have it at when I really want to crank it up. So I called Crutchfield and told them what I liked about the Opticon 2 Mark IIs and what I didn't care for about them, mostly being that I wanted a speaker with a little bit more dynamics to it. And so my initial idea was I would exchange the Opticon 2 Mark II for an Opticon 6 or Opticon 8 floor standing speaker. Now, Paul at Crutchfield said those are good choices, except I'd already mentioned my sensitivity to sibilance, and he was concerned that the dual tweeter setup on the Opticon 6 and 8 would be bothersome to me, so he steered me towards the Oberon 9s, which I have here in front of me. And I have to say his recommendation was very good. I really do enjoy the Oberon 9s. So let's get a little closer look at the Oberon 9s. First of all, the grills are very handsome, kind of a gray tweed fabric, and a nice plastic backing on it, and very minimal. Playing them with and without the grills, there's very little difference in the sound. The grills might take the upper frequencies down just a smidge, but they're as acoustically invisible as anything I've ever heard. So they did a great job there. So the driver layout on the Oberon 9 is you've got your mid-range on top, tweeter, and two 9-inch woofers. The cabinet is extensively braced inside, has a very thick front panel, and the cabinet's divided into 3 sections. Dividers inside of the cabinet are not parallel to the cabinet. They're at angles to break up any standing waves. So a lot of thought went into the construction on these. And Paul was absolutely right. These things will rock the house. He said they were Dali's most dynamic speakers, and I can believe it. But I am stepping down one model line from the Opticon 2s to the Oberon 9s, and I expected there to be some trade-offs, and there are. Now, these guys have the same huge soundstage and generous sweet spot that the Opticon 2s had. They also have great vocals, detail without fatigue, and they're a little bit easier to drive since they're a little bit more efficient than the Opticon 2s. The trade-offs, which I was fully expecting, are that they have a little bit less detail, a little bit less air, and I think they're a little bit warmer tonally overall than the Opticon 2s were. Now with my old speakers, I had a tremendous amount of wall treatment in here to try to tame those overly bright high frequencies on my original speakers. I took down some of that sound deadening material off the walls when I had the Opticon 2s in here. After these were broken in about 100 hours and I got down to some serious listening, I actually ended up removing all of the acoustic treatment in this room to try to let these things breathe a little bit better and help the upper frequencies a little bit better. And that did definitely help. I still have the bass traps in the corners, but everything else has been removed from the room. And if I had received a left and right version of this speaker, and if it hadn't been damaged, I would have said that these are my forever speakers and I've been happy as a clam. But it didn't quite work out that way. A couple little glitches happened on getting these speakers from Crutchfield to me. First of all, Crutchfield accidentally sent me 2 left speakers, And more importantly, the courier or UPS, whoever, manhandled them, managed to put a nice big crunch in the cabinet right here. And so I found this when unboxing them, and I immediately stopped what I was doing, shot some photos, contacted Crutchfield, and I told them, I said, obviously this is an issue and these will need to come back. I said, but I'm okay with listening to them for a while and seeing how I like them before we do anything else. And so they said that was fine, just let them know. And so I reached out to Dali, called the phone number that's on the website, thinking I'm never going to talk to a person. I'm going to get some voicemail or something like that. And I was really surprised that in a moment or two, I was talking to an actual human being. And I told the woman I had a pair of Oberon 9s and one was damaged. And did it really matter if I got a left-right pair? Or could I just send back a damaged speaker, get another right speaker, and any right speaker would work with the left I have? And she said she didn't know, but there's a guy who would know. And she gave me a phone number for a fellow named Brian. And he's works for the distributor that sells Dali in the U.S. And I called Brian, and again, he picked right up. We started talking a little bit, and it turns out we've owned a lot of the same speakers over the years. And it sounds like our wants for what we hope for in a loudspeaker are very similar. And he was very generous with his time. We spent about 30 or 45 minutes on the phone. And he asked me, why did I step down from the Opticon line to the Oberon line? And I told him, well, the fellow from Crutchfield was concerned that the dual tweeter on the Opticon 6 or 8 might be a bit much for my ears. And Brian said nothing could be further from the truth. He said that tweeter only kicks in at about 13,000 hertz, and he said it adds more air and detail to the music and expands the sound field even more, but it is not at all fatiguing. And he predicted that I would find these a little bit less detailed than the Opticon 2s, and I said, that's exactly what I'm experiencing. And he said, if you're happy with the Oberon 9s, that's great. He said, but if you'd kind of like to have your cake and eat it too, he said, I think the Opticon 6 or 8 is the speaker for you. And I told him, I said, well, that's originally what I was headed towards. And he said, of the two, the 8 is the better speaker. The driver layout on the 8 is a little unique. If you look at the Opticon 8, it has a woofer on top, high frequency tweeter, mid-range woofer on the bottom. If you look at the Opticon 6, it's a more traditional layout with the two woofers at the bottom. And he explained that both Opticon models were another level from what I'm experiencing from the Oberon 9s. And he said the Opticon 8, because of its driver arrangement, goes another additional level above what I'm getting here. And he said if you look at the flagship model, it has that arrangement with woofer top and bottom. If you look at one model down from the flagship model, it has the woofer top and bottom. And so by the time I got off the phone with Brian, I absolutely wanted an Opticon 8, or a pair of them actually. And so I called Crutchfield and I talked to Paul and I said, as you know, I got two left Oberon 9s and one of them is badly damaged. And he pulled up my file. He said, yeah, I see that here. And I said, is there any chance I could return both Oberon 9s and get a pair of Opticon 8s? And he said, absolutely. He says, it's no more difficult for us to take one speaker back and send you another right speaker than it is just to take both of them back and get you what you want. He said, the only catch is we are out of stock and back ordered on Opticon 8s right now. So he said, if it's okay with you, I'll get your credit card information. We'll put you in line for the Opticon 8s. We'll extend your trial of the Oberon 9s so I don't take your speakers away from you. And when the Opticon 8s come in and we get ready to ship them, we'll send you the shipping labels and you return the Oberon 9s. I mean, that's crazy. The Crutchfield folks have been so helpful and patient with me. And the fellow Brian with Dali, again, so generous with his time and great advice. I said, that's great. Let me give you my credit card information. So I've got a pair of Opticon 8s on order with Crutchfield. So I thought, let me call Brian back. So I called Brian back, and he picked up the phone. I said, Brian, you're a very bad man. I said, you've made me spend money I didn't plan on spending. He laughed, thought that was pretty funny. And we talked a little bit. He said, I think you made the right decision. You're going to love the Opticon 8s. He said, I want you to call me back when you get them in. I want to hear from you what you think. And I told him I would. And I said, the only catch is Crutchfield is backordered on the Opticon 8s. And he said, hang on a second. And he put me on hold, and he came back. He said, I show that we have plenty of them in our warehouse. He said, I'll see if I can't get some to Crutchfield as soon as possible so they can fulfill your order. Again, I'm not doing this for Crutchfield. I'm not doing this for Dali. I'm not getting any consideration. This is all my own money to help me with my audiophile journey to get to my next forever speakers. These folks have been so helpful to me, and I couldn't have asked for anything more in terms of customer service, and I can't wait to get my hands on the Opticon 8s. These are a fine speaker, and if I had received a left-right pair, I would have stopped right here. But after talking to Brian, I can't. I have to take it to the next level. And so shame on you, Brian. You made me spend more money than I meant to, but it's been a fun journey so far, and I can't wait to see this to the end. And so when I get my hands on the Opticon 8s, I will definitely break them in and let you guys know how I like them. So thank you for joining me on this journey. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thanks.